The story is nice, but the numbers, not entirely there. At least that's what they're claiming. But we can see here in this photo, the freedom flu. Police officers in Seattle flying the Gadsden flag from their vehicles. More than one photo has emerged. Reports are that Seattle PD is refusing the vaccine mandate. And many of these officers are going to take time off while they decide what they're going to do. What it really sounds like to me is that they're going to take all of their paid time off, vacation, sick, take as much from that system as they can before they say, yo, we out. Freedom first. Now, we saw this with Southwest. Right now, there's protests going on. Southwest employees are saying no to the vaccine mandates, but the media says that these individuals weren't organizing any kind of protest or sick out. They're right. But they're also wrong because they're telling you there's no organized effort against the vaccine mandates, which is technically the truth. But they're not telling you the full truth. And that's many of these employees are extracting their paid time off, or they're using it and their vacation time because they know they're about to get fired. I mean, it's a heavy thing to be mandated to undergo a medical procedure against your will. I'm not surprised we're seeing people say outright no. But the numbers, at least the official numbers, which could be wrong, are not too promising. In Seattle, we're hearing either 11% of officers who are refusing or 6%. A substantial number. I think it matters. But it's still a small number relative to the amount of people who are just like, I'll do whatever I'm told. You got to understand what happens to the future if you comply with things like this. If they can mandate something like this, they can mandate anything. And I think ultimately, if you want to get vaccinated, go to your doctor and talk to him about it. Joe Rogan has his doctor, as I always mention, because people are like, doctors are dumb, Tim. I don't trust my doctor. Well, then get a better doctor. That's why I say it all the time. It's policy. It's mandate. It's authoritarianism. That we cannot allow. Now, things are starting to get spicy. Take a look at this story, and then we'll talk about New York and their vaccine mandate, because this is good. A sad story, actually, but it's getting spicy. I'll put it that way. I shouldn't say good. The Daily Mail reports wild gunfight erupts on the streets of Brooklyn as police arrest suspect in killing of taxi driver. They say a suspect wanted in connection with the murder of a cabbie engaged cops in a gun battle in Brooklyn on Sunday before being arrested. New Rochelle police have been staking out an address at Myrtle Avenue and Fleet Walk in Fort Greene after spotting a Dodge car belonging to the 52-year-old male. The suspect walked out of a building at around 10:30 a.m. and started shooting at officers who returned fire. All of a sudden, you hear, hey, hey, and guys running from them. Officer running up, and all of a sudden, cops pull up. Bam, bam, bam. Guys hiding behind a tree. Local resident Jermaine Diaz said. People scattered as shooting broke out across the street, with one bullet smashing through the glass window of an empty store. Yikes, man. We all jumped to the ground. Lady fall in front of me. Guy fell, came back up. Old man tripped, started flying. The suspect, who has not been identified, was later detained and a gun retrieved from the scene. There were no reports of any injuries to either the suspect or the cops. Now, this is just one story. Just one story. And it's New York. Stories like this do happen. But for a long time, crime was going down. In fact, crime is still down from like several decades ago. The issue is, from its lowest point, crime is now going up. And it's likely due to Democrat policy. There was one story where a guy with the cash bail reform, he got arrested like a handful of times. And then when they let him out, he just was laughing, saying, y'all caught me do it. You're letting me go again. Something to that effect. This is the policy of the Democrats. But I'll put it this way. That's less important than what we're seeing now with vaccine mandates. These police officers engaged a man who sought to kill, who killed. They risked their lives. Man, it's a thankless job in many respects. Now, I got a lot of criticism to go around for police. A lot of policing is petty and a waste of our time. A lot of cops are good dudes. I've been pulled over before knowing I've done something wrong, and I've had a cop just be like, come on, man, here's a warning. And I'm like, you got me, dude. When I was young and I'm speeding. And then I've also had really bad cops try planting drugs on me, accuse me of speeding when I wasn't, because it turns out, we're all people. That's why authoritarianism is bad, because we're all people. No individual knows what's best. And right now, Dr. Fauci there's a video going around with Dr. Sanjay Gupta talking to Dr. Fauci about an Israel study on natural immunity. And Fauci said he had no good answer why we shouldn't take natural immunity into account. So maybe we will. That still, I think, distracts from the greater conversation of no vaccine mandates. We shouldn't be mandating medical procedures. Testing is where you get it gets a little different, but I still don't think that should be mandated either. I think people should be accepting of the risks they take in the real world. What's happening now is As that conversation emerges, there's an actual conversation around what we require of our police. And the police are saying no. They're flying Gadsden flags, which brings me to what's happening in New York. From patch.com, NYPD, FDNY COVID vax rates remain flat amid mandate talks. Nothing's off the table. Mayor Bill de Blasio repeated this week about potential municipal worker vaccine mandates. From patch.com, they say barely a handful of New York City's unvaccinated police and firefighters got a dose of COVID-19 vaccine in the week since Mayor Bill de Blasio hinted at further city workforce mandates, data shows. Both NYPD and FDNY, two of the largest and most public-facing New York City agencies, remain in the bottom 10 of the city's department's vaccination rates, according to the mayor's office data compiled Wednesday. In a week, NYPD's percentage of workers who received at least one dose ticked up a single point to 69%. FDNY's vaccination rate stayed flat at 59%. Woo! Those are some pretty big numbers. And what do you think's going to happen to a city like New York when there's no cops? I'll tell you. I've seen it. I have seen it during Hurricane Sandy when EMS, police, first responders were stretched so thin. The power was out. And, man, I went to a bodega, little corner store, and they had two guys standing next to the door holding like bats and 2x4s. And they had a line at the door, one person allowed in at a time. You maybe have heard me talk about this story before. That's what you will revert to. Because the police do help keep the peace. As much as the left doesn't want to admit it, it's true. And that's why I think policing is a good thing. Now, I will say, as of recent, I've been saying abolish the police. And you've heard me say it a million times. Because as we're entering more COVID restrictions, I do not trust these institutions to actually do the right thing. We talked about this. I can't remember who we were talking to on timcast.rl. And I said, how do the high-ranking NYPD officers get their jobs? They're appointed. They're appointed by Democrats. Okay. Are Democrats racist? Invariably, moderates and conservatives say, yes, they are. Democrats deny it, but I can prove they are. Democrats appoint police officers who are then accused by Democrats of being racist, of racially profiling black people and Latinos in Democrat cities. All of the stories we heard about, I shouldn't say all of the stories, but most of the stories we heard about police brutality come from urban environments that are typically Democrat. In red areas where people are more personally responsible and bear their own arms, you get quite different stories. But of course, we still had Ahmaud Arbery, which was a particularly red area. I'm not saying it's absolute. I'm just saying New York is a particularly good example. Seattle. When these activists come out and say all of these cops are racist and got to be abolished, I'm like, they were appointed by the people you voted for. Now, not all of the people voted for these Democrats, but yeah, it's not conservatives appointing these Democrat cops. So I'll put it this way. If Democrats are going to be appointing police and the police are going to be enforcing illegal and unconstitutional actions, we probably should rethink what we're doing with these departments right now, because while the general idea seems to make sense, yeah, have a police force, right now in the realism, I'll put it this way. We are not looking at real policing. We are maybe we're not looking at idealized policing. We're looking at real world policing with all its political garbage mixed up in it. If you come to me and say some local community members are going to be granted the authority of the state to try and enforce the law, they'll be constrained by certain civilian oversight boards. They'll be granted certain privileges in defense of their actions and things like that. And I'm like, I get it. I think overall a police force is sort of a neutral arbiter in many senses is a really good idea. I was thinking about this I can't remember what I was watching, but I was thinking about, when I was younger, my parents, if I was fighting with my siblings, my parents would be like, you need to learn how to figure it out for yourself. You go work it out. And I'm like, we're fighting. We're yelling. It's not being worked out. We need arbitration. And it's actually really annoying to me to think about my parents being like, you figure it on your own. You need to learn how to do it. No, that's not how the system works. When two adults are fighting over like, your fence is on my property line. No, it isn't. And then, they go to court. They seek a higher authority to be the arbiter of these circumstances. And I think that's fair and fine. I think about that in terms of police and what they provide. And it's like, yeah, if there's a conflict, the cops will come out and try to stop conflict and then try and resolve it. Far from perfect. The problem I have now is the politicization of it. In these cities like New York, where it's overwhelmingly Democrats appointing these officers who then get accused of being racist, and if they're going to be mandating vaccines or other restrictions, it will be the police to enforce it. More importantly, they already enforce the violation of your Second Amendment rights. Period. Shall not be infringed. So saith the Second Amendment. So you should be able to keep and bear arms in New York. You can't. In Maryland, you can't. In New Jersey, you can't. In Illinois, you can't. In many of these places. Oh, they argue you can. They just make it extremely difficult. I'll put it this way. The state has no right to issue press passes. I love that in New York City, they're like, did you get your New York City press pass? I'm like, what authority does the government have to say who is and isn't a journalist? The same is true for bearing arms. Who gives you the right to infringe upon my right to keep and bear arms, to speak my mind, to report? So I look at this and I say, here's my concern. For one, respect to these cops who are standing up for freedom. But I'm not entirely convinced they will defend freedom in the long run. I think as soon as they get what they want, they'll turn right around and use the power of the state against the civilians. We've seen it before. The famous story, and I could be wrong about this, maybe, but the famous story I was told was that Youngstown, Ohio, the police were protesting during Occupy Wall Street with firefighters. And the moment the city negotiated with the cops and gave them what they wanted, they turned around and started arresting firefighters. Maybe that's like a bit exaggerated. Maybe it was like one firefighter or something. That's the story that you hear. Now, when I look at things like this, I look at New York City, where they they painted Black Lives Matter by illegally appropriating tax funds from the city population. And then those police gleefully defended it. Was it 27 officers? Said, we're going to guard this illegal action by the mayor for political purposes. Okay. The moment I saw that, maybe I should have realized it sooner, but that right there is like, abolish the police. Sorry. If the Democrats are appointing cops, who are hiring cops, who are defending the corrupt and illegal activities, those cops are criminals. We're going to go make an argument about the legislature and legislation. There's a law that says this, that, or otherwise, and the cops are enforcing it. That violates my rights, perhaps. But that's more of a civil issue, and it's a bad one. Our freedoms are being encroached, but it's not like there was a law that we all agreed on, and then the cops walked over and then just started, bashing you over the head or something. That, to me, is like you have a criminal police force. Michael Malice likes to say that all cops are criminals, and he says that there is no law so egregious that the cops would not enforce it, up and including executing children. That's a very serious claim. I don't know if I would agree with. However, I would agree in a certain respect. I'll put it this way. If you have a cop right now, I guarantee you it would be an extreme, disturbing occurrence that officer would actually follow out with orders to kill a child. That being said, as an institution, I completely agree with Michael Malice. Here's what's going to happen. They're going to purge the police officers. They're going to purge the law enforcement. They're going to say you have to get the vaccine or else. The only people who are left in the military and in law enforcement are going to be lemmings. It's unfair to lemmings. I know that whole story was fake, but you get the point. NPCs, cogs in the machine. These are the people who will absolutely blindly follow those orders. That's the institution that I believe Michael Malice is correct about. The individuals, not so much. But until they purge them, maybe we should start being worried about that now that they're starting to get rid of these officers. I think in New York City, a big piece of what we're seeing is that these individuals are trying to negotiate for better union rates. And that if the government wants to make a mandate, then their union has to grant them something. I think most of these cops are probably going to just say, I'll get the vaccine as soon as they give me better pay or whatever. That's typically how it goes. In the end, if we sit back and we don't demand accountability, we are going to end up with a police state Gestapo. We're getting close, mind you. We are. We've seen some egregious action from cops. I think the right got a rude awakening when protesters in the Pacific Northwest were like peacefully protesting legit and the cops blocked them to defend Antifa. Or when a man who was being like essentially threatened by Antifa got arrested himself and the cops apologized to Antifa. You see where this goes? They want you, the good officers, to quit, to resign. And they don't care how or why. Maybe they'll say, that person you arrested, we're letting go. You won't be able to do your job. And then cops get frustrated and say, I'm out. I can't do this. The cops that remain are like, don't care. Then they're going to say, okay, those that remain, we're going to mandate a medical injection against your will. Otherwise, you're fired. And a lot of them will say, don't care. And some of them will be like, yo, that's the line. But where's the line for the rest of these officers? Sooner or later, you'll end up with nothing but a police force that just does exactly what they're told. And then we'll be like the UK, Australia, or Canada, with the cops kicking your door in because there are reports that there were 7 people in your building. We got a report that there were 6 people in this apartment. Yes, we're having a family dinner. That's 1 person too many. And have you seen the video in Canada? And they start beating the guy and they're dragging him out and they're screaming. Have you seen the videos from Australia or from the UK where I think it was in Scotland. It may have been Scotland, where the police show up to a house and they're like, where is he? And they're like, what's happening? He's accused of violating lockdown. It's like, he's been here the whole time. Don't care. And they like throw the mom to the ground and they're like trying to drag some guy. It's crazy stuff. Australia's building camps. That's not going to end anytime soon. So while I can respect these officers who are standing up and saying no, I'm not entirely convinced it's going to matter. Because to be honest, this is probably what these establishment Democrats want. They want these cops to leave. Now, they don't want the crime while they're there. They don't want to be threatened. Take a look at the Chaz, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. When they took that over, the city did not care one bit until they protested at the mayor's house. I believe it was the mayor. And then all of a sudden, the cops came in and just swept them out. Don't you come after me or else. Antifa gets a free pass so long as they're attacking enemies of the political establishment. You have a political establishment right now that wants you to quit Seattle police officers, that wants you to quit NYPD. The fire department, not so much, but still, yeah. They want you to quit so they can have their own private armies, a bunch of clone troopers saying, yes, sir, how high, sir, not questioning a single thing. And then you will get what Michael Malice predicts. Then you will start to see how bad it is when you end up with cops that will just do anything because they want to keep their jobs. The Daily Mail reports Chicago restricts cops from taking time off as department threatens to axe up to half of its 13,000 officers who are yet to declare their vaccination status. You see, there is a freedom flu going around. It's not exactly what a lot of people thought it was. And the media is certainly lying, but it's there. It's individuals saying, I'm about to lose my job. Time for vacation. Time to call in sick. They didn't organize it, but here you go. CPD officers were given until Friday to disclose their COVID-19 vaccination status. Unvaccinated Chicago cops face being terminated under the city's vaccine mandate. This could result in up to half of the city's 13,000 cops being axed by the city. As a result, a memo was sent out on Saturday saying time off will be restricted. Ooh, this is going to get fun in Chicago, isn't it? They call it Chirac. There are more gun deaths in Chicago than in Iraq. Okay, there's population differences, but isn't it amazing? Now, I don't know if the Chicago police are doing the right things in Chicago. I think, in fact, the institution of the Chicago police is particularly corrupt. It's bad, man. It really is bad. Yeah. Not a whole lot I can say outside of that, but I think it's corrupt. I don't think every cop is, however. I've met my share of good cops, and I've heard my stories and met my share of bad cops. I have been saved from a mugging by several officers. Me and my brother got hit by a cab driver, and the cops, they defended us. Cars colliding, car accident. And then when the police came and saw it, they were like, we think we understand what happened here, and they took our side, and they helped us out tremendously. I've seen some good cops. It was a crazy experience having some guy try to mug me, and I'm flat broke. And then the cops came up and stopped it in progress, and they arrested the guy and screamed in his face. It was amazing. And then I've also had bad cops. I've seen them. I've seen crooked cops come and make things up and arrest people, plant drugs, all that stuff. CPD's got really bad stories. There's a story about activists who were secretly filming cops and then got arrested. Disappeared for like 10 days. The Chicago PD were operating what they called black sites, meaning locations where they did operations off the books. There's the famous story of that guy who was electrocuting people into confessions. What was that guy's name? I can't remember that guy's name. You know what I'm talking about? It was a Chicago detective, I guess, and he would electrocute people forcing confessions, and they'd lock them up. Man, I can't remember what that guy's name was. Anyway, I digress. You get it. There are a lot of good cops. They don't get paid enough. It's a very dangerous job. Imagine being involved in a shootout in Brooklyn and then being told that you're going to lose your job unless you undergo a forced medical procedure. Now, these people who are going to quit, where do they go? I don't know. And the ones who stay, what are they willing to do? Because you need to understand is that as much as we've seen bad cops, sometimes the good cops are the ones stopping it from going overboard. Scruples. There could be a bad cop who's like, I can't cross that line because this guy will stop me. Well, then goody two-shoes officer McGee gets fired because he refuses to undergo the vax mandate or enforce it. And now this guy is like, the only people left are the scumbags like me, and we can do whatever we want. Or the cowards, you know. The people who are like, I don't like what's happening, but I'm more than willing to be a part of that machine. Because the snowflake doesn't blame itself for the avalanche. It's different here, though. Imagine if the snowflake could get up and leave, but decided not to. Because the avalanche is just more comfortable. My kids are eating for now. But once that avalanche is done, there ain't going to be any more food. And the shortages we're seeing are due to your compliance. If people stood up for their rights, we wouldn't be in this mess in the first place. We'll see how these cities handle it when they lose all these cops, though. Because as much as I'm saying like the bad cops will remain, they're still going to be lacking a lot of cops as crime skyrockets. So I'll leave it there. Next segment is coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.